few weeks ago, we covered why an RRSP meltdown may ruin your retirement. Well, today we'll be looking at when an RRSP meltdown might save it and how you can figure that out with a few simple questions. As Canadian financial planners, we've dealt with many situations where an RRSP meltdown strategy could have saved so many people significant money in retirement. That's exactly why we're making this video today, to help you determine if an RRSP meltdown strategy is the right move for your situation through a simple set of questions. Let's get into it.
So, to determine whether or not an RRSP meltdown strategy is right for your situation, you should ask yourself a number of questions. The first question will be, will your retirement income put you in a higher marginal tax bracket than what you were when you made your RRSP contributions? Now, John, why would that be important to know?
Well, it's very important because the RRSP in itself is a tax deferral plan, right? So when you're putting money in, you're saving tax dollars based on your income at that time. And then when you're taking money out, you're going to pay tax on it in your retirement. And the ideal scenario for most Canadians for them to truly maximize the benefit of this RRSP is going to be your high income earner or higher income earner when you're working and a lower income earner when you're retired. And that's what the most scenarios that people would expect to achieve. So that's a very important question for us, because if you're going to be a high income earner come retirement time, it may start to make sense to take some money out of that RRSP before we get to that point. So you take it out at a lower tax than if you were to wait until retirement, you take out a higher tax. So knowing that, how can someone use then this question to determine if an RRSP meltdown is right for them?
Well, John, I think it's important for Canadians to understand what their income sources are going to be
Yes.
in retirement when they're determining to use this RRSP meltdown strategy. Because with an RRSP, you can kind of determine how high your marginal tax rate is going to be depending on how many other income sources you have. So let's say you have a work pension, a defined benefit plan. Now you know you're already going to have this base level of income that's going to put you into this first or beyond the first marginal tax bracket, maybe into the second or third. That will definitely play a role in determining how much you would be taking out of your RRSP and where you'd want that income to stop before you went into that next marginal tax bracket.
So the next question that Canadians should ask themselves if they want to do an RRSP meltdown strategy is, do you want to reduce the income taxes you're going to have upon the estate and reduce potential old age security clawbacks in your retirement? Now, Carla, why would this be a very important question for people to consider?
We know that we're going to pay tax,
Yes.
whether it's now or later. And I think most Canadians want to pay the least amount of tax possible, depending on when they're going to be generating that income. So you mentioned a very interesting point, the OAS clawback.
Yes.
Now, OAS, as most people know, is the old age security, the income that you get from the government. It's based on how long you've lived in the country after your 18th birthday. Let's say you're eligible for the most, which is just over $700 a month, so about $8,500 a year, $8,500 a year. Now, that's already going to be a base level of income that you need to know before you start determining how much you're going to pull out of your RRSP. But remember that old age security is income tested. There's an amount of income that you can earn as a Canadian before that benefit starts to get clawed back. And in 2024, that number was just over $90,000. So you want to be careful that if you are taking advantage of the strategy, you're not pulling out more than what you need to go to even touch that threshold and compromise the amount of old age security that you're receiving.
So if you answered yes to this question, then the RRSP meltdown probably would be a good idea for you. Essentially what it's going to do is you're going to be able to take money out of your RRSP before it gets to the point of having to go through the estate and it gets taxed incredibly heavily. So the idea there is if you have a very large RRSP and potentially in the estate it could be losing 53% of it to taxes, ideally you take it now over the course of your retirement where maybe it's a lower tax rate, 25 to 30% in that scenario. And also in regards to old age security clawbacks, if you have an idea of where your income is going to be, like Carlo mentioned, if it's over that $90,000 threshold through your retirement, then it may start making sense to start taking some money out of the RRSPs earlier on. That way you have control over how much income you can report at that time. Once you do get your RRSPs and convert them to a RIF, there's going to be a minimum amount that has to come out of that account every year. So if you know that minimum that has to come out of the account is going to push you above the $90,000 threshold, then absolutely the RRSP meltdown would be a good option for you.
Another question to ask yourself would be, do I have unused TFSA contribution room? If the answer is yes, then the RRSP meltdown strategy probably makes a lot of sense to you. Because when you take money out of the RRSP, as we all know, the RRSP is a tax-deferred vehicle, meaning any investment income earned that's earned on an annual basis, you don't have to add into your income for that year. If you are taking money out of your RRSP for the meltdown strategy and you have to invest it elsewhere, you'd want it to enjoy the same tax-deferred benefits.
Yep.
In the tax-free savings account, as we've discussed before, any investment income earned on that investment within the account, tax-free. So you're still enjoying that deferral of taxes, or in this case, in the TFSA, not paying any income tax on the investment income earned.
Yeah, that's the ideal situation. I mean, taking money out of your RSP and just parking it somewhere else where it could still continue to grow on a tax-deferred manner. Now, obviously, if you're not in this position and it's an open account, it's still beneficial, but maybe not as great. Obviously, we want to avoid paying as much tax as we need to. But the tax-free savings account is an excellent tool. You know, we've touched on it in videos in the past where it becomes an excellent tool in retirement. Another way you can access money without having to get the CRA involved.
As a household, there's over just under $200,000 in room that a couple could be using. So if you think about moving some monies from your RSP, if your TFSAs have never been used, that's a significant amount of money that could have investments grow tax-free.
Another question you should be considering when it comes time to determine whether you need to do the RSP meltdown strategy is, are you going to have other sources of income, stable sources of income like CPP, pension, old age security throughout your retirement? Now, this is a very important question to consider because if you're not going to have these sources of stable income, then that's probably what your RSP was meant to provide to you. So the RSP meltdown strategy is more of a luxury, I guess, for those that already have some degree of stable retirement income already set up. And this allows you to start taking money out of the RSP and putting it to other sources like we talked about, the open accounts or TFSAs, and just mitigate the amount of taxes that you need to be paid. If you don't have those other sources of income from pensions or otherwise, then the RSP is meant to be your pension. So maybe the meltdown strategy would not be right for you.
Yeah, John, that makes total sense. If you do have a reliable income stream in retirement, then the RSP meltdown strategy is strictly a tax-saving strategy. You've got your income for living expenses already taken care of. This would just be saving taxes over the long term by implementing the strategy. Last question that you may want to consider when determining whether or not to use the RSP meltdown strategy is, are you comfortable with a strategic long-term plan to pay more taxes now than in retirement? Essentially what happens when you're doing the RSP meltdown strategy is you are paying tax ahead of time that you wouldn't necessarily need to be doing. You are taking more money out of your RSP than what is necessary, but it's to do it at a lower tax rate than what it could be further along into retirement. So in a sense, you are paying the taxes, you're paying more taxes than you need to in that year, but it's to pay a lower rate of tax and minimize the amount of tax that you'll have to pay at estate time.
I think that's the biggest mental hurdle that a lot of people face. Nobody likes to pay taxes, and now we're choosing or opting to paying additional taxes, which instantly kind of rubs people the wrong way, and obviously understandably so. But at the end of the day, we try to look at the bigger picture. If we know there's going to be a high income scenario coming up down the road, and we're trying to avoid that, or if maybe one of your wishes is to pass on money through the estate in the most tax efficient manner, then absolutely this strategy is going to make sense. But it might come with a little bit of pain points of having to pay taxes preemptively or before you need to.
Let's use some actual numbers here, John.
Yeah.
The marginal tax rates in Canada are graduated, as I'm sure most of you know. The first marginal tax rate would be 20%. Yeah. Then there's a small amount of $4,000 between $50,000 and $54,000. That's at 24%. The next bracket would be 29%, call it 30%, and that caps out at $90,000. Let's say that you have a $500,000 RSP and you have CPP and old age security. You could take out more from your RSP, get within that third marginal tax bracket of 30%, and know that the money you took out of your RSP, you were guaranteeing you were only going to pay 30% on. Whereas a value of your RSP at $500,000, if both you and your partner were gone in that year, it would push you up into the highest marginal tax rate of 53%.
Yeah.
That money that you took out of the RSP in the meltdown strategy would save you 23% in tax. That's a significant amount of tax to be saving.
Now that you've seen the key questions that if you answer yes to, you should do an RSP meltdown, you need to understand one thing. These qualifying questions are the first step in determining if this powerful strategy is right for you. You can't walk away from this video thinking that a few yes answers guarantee an RSP meltdown is your best move. Between timing your withdrawals perfectly, coordinating with your CPP benefits, and protecting yourself from costly CRA surprises, the strategy needs to be planned correctly based on your situation. If you want us to evaluate your situation and determine if an RSP meltdown could maximize your retirement savings, click the first link in the description to book a free call with the team. We'll see you in the next one.